Title: She went missing after prom night. Decades later, the truth emerged. The vanishing. The night was meant to be unforgettable for all the right reasons. For 17-year-old Melissa Turner, prom night was supposed to mark the end of high school and the beginning of a new life. She had slipped into her shimmering blue gown, posed for photos with her parents on the front porch, and danced under the soft glow of glittering lights in the decorated gym. Laughter, music, and the nervous energy of teenagers filled the night. But as the final song played and couples drifted into the parking lot, Melissa was seen walking toward her car. That was the last time anyone ever saw her alive. The next morning, when Melissa's mother walked into her room, the bed was untouched. Panic set in quickly. Phone calls went unanswered, and when friends confirmed she had left the prom alone, fear turned into alarm. By late morning, a patrol unit located her car in the back of a deserted shopping mall lot. The vehicle was locked, keys still dangling in the ignition, her evening purse tossed carelessly on the passenger seat. To investigators, it was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, but clues suggested otherwise. The driver's side door bore faint scratches, as if someone had tried to pull it open. The ground nearby showed scuff marks, a heel imprint frozen in the damp earth. And inside the car, detectives found a single, chilling piece of evidence: Melissa's corsage, crushed and smeared with dirt, lying on the back seat. The community of Green Valley, a quiet Midwestern town where everyone knew everyone else, erupted with fear. This wasn't the kind of place where girls went missing. By evening, hundreds of volunteers poured into the streets, forming search lines across fields and forests. Police dogs sniffed the area around the mall. Helicopters flew low, their searchlight HTS sweeping across the dark landscape. Every hour that passed without a discovery weighed heavier on the hearts of the searchers. Investigators began peeling back the layers of Melissa's life, hoping to find a clue. Teachers described her as a bright, dedicated student, someone with a future full of promise. Her friends admitted she had been distracted in recent weeks, talking less, slipping away during lunch breaks. Some whispered about an older boy she had been secretly texting. Others recalled a car, a dark sedan, that had been seen circling the school parking lot in the weeks before prom. Each detail raised more questions than answers. Detectives interviewed Melissa's prom date, a classmate she had gone with as just friends. He swore she had left the dance early, alone, smiling politely as she said goodnight. They pressed her close friends, her co-workers at the diner, even her parents. That's when the first shadow of doubt emerged. Melissa's mother admitted she had noticed her daughter growing secretive, hiding notes in her room, guarding her phone as if it contained something she didn't want anyone to see. By the end of the first week, the investigation had stalled. No ransom note, no body, no confirmed suspect. Melissa's disappearance became the lead story on local news, and the longer she stayed missing, the louder the whispers grew. Some suspected she had run away with a secret boyfriend. Others believed she had been targeted by a stranger. But detectives were convinced this wasn't a runaway case. Something violent had happened in that parking lot, and someone in town knew more than they were saying. Then came the first break. A man walking his dog near the edge of the woods, less than a mile from where Melissa's car had been found, stumbled on a disturbing clue: her prom shoes, neatly placed side by side beneath a tree. To detectives, it wasn't just a discarded item, it was a message. Someone wanted them to know she hadn't left on her own. The case had just shifted from a missing persons search to something far more sinister. And the terrifying truth of what had really happened that night was only beginning to surface. Decades of silence. The discovery of Melissa Turner's shoes beneath the tree was the last solid clue investigators would have for years. Detectives scoured the woods, digging through underbrush and draining a nearby pond, but there was nothing more to find. The trail went cold almost as quickly as it began. For Melissa's family, the days bled into weeks, then months, each marked by vigils and false hope. The town of Green Valley never recovered from the shock. Parents locked their doors earlier, teenagers no longer lingered outside after dark, and every unfamiliar car in town drew suspicious stares. For Melissa's mother, each passing season felt like a cruel reminder that her daughter's case was slipping further out of reach. She left the porch light on every night, hoping against reason that Melissa might one day walk back through the door. The police file on Melissa's disappearance thickened with time, filled with anonymous tips, rumors, and wild theories. One caller claimed she'd been spotted at a bus station 3 states away. Another swore Melissa had been abducted by someone in law enforcement. None of it held up. Leads were followed and discarded, each one leaving investigators more frustrated. The case became the kind that haunted detectives long after retirement, a ghost story whispered about among rookies just joining the force. Years passed, and the world changed. Technology advanced, DNA science evolved, and cold case units emerged across the country. But for Melissa's family, little changed. Her mother aged under the weight of unanswered questions, her father passed away never knowing what had happened, and her younger brother grew into adulthood with his sister's photo permanently taped to his bedroom mirror. Then, in the early 2000s, a glimmer of hope appeared. A new detective, Angela Ramirez, took over the cold case files. She wasn't weighed down by the disappointments of the past, she saw the case through fresh eyes. Digging through the evidence, she found something others had overlooked: a partial fingerprint lifted from the door handle of Melissa's car. It had been run through state databases back in 1979, but there had never been a match. Ramirez decided to run it again, this time through the newly expanded national system. For weeks, she waited, but the results were the same: no match. Whoever left that print had never been caught, never booked, never fingerprinted in the decades since Melissa's disappearance. Still, Ramirez refused to let the case die. She began contacting private forensic labs, asking if they could re-examine Melissa's corsage, the shoes, even fibers taken from the car. Most told her the evidence was too degraded, too old to work with. But one lab agreed to try. Months later, a phone call changed everything. The lab had pulled a usable DNA profile from the corsage. It wasn't a full sample, but it was enough to begin the process of genealogical testing, a technology that had cracked cases once thought unsolvable. The DNA was uploaded, and within weeks, analysts began piecing together a family tree. Slowly, it narrowed down to a handful of men from a single bloodline. Detectives zeroed in on one man, a quiet, unassuming mechanic who had lived in Green Valley at the time of Melissa's disappearance. He had since moved 2 states away, living a life that seemed ordinary: married, children, a steady job. But his name had never once appeared in the original case files. He had been invisible to investigators, a shadow who slipped away before suspicion could touch him. When detectives pulled his background, the timeline was chilling. He had left Green Valley just weeks after Melissa vanished. He had lived near at least 2 other towns where young women had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. And though he had never been arrested, there were whispers in old reports, complaints of harassment, odd behavior, rumors that never turned into charges. Armed with this new lead, detectives prepared to confront him. They knew it could be their only chance to finally bring justice to Melissa Turner's family after more than 4 decades of silence. But what they would uncover inside his home would not only confirm their suspicions, it would reveal a darkness far deeper than anyone imagined. The final revelation: detectives approached the mechanic's modest home on a quiet suburban street with heavy anticipation. It was a simple house, neatly trimmed lawn, children's bikes scattered in the driveway, a fresh coat of paint on the shutters. To neighbors, he was the picture of an ordinary family man. But investigators knew better. They had his DNA link, his suspicious history, and a timeline that aligned too perfectly. This was the moment the Turner family had waited 40 years for. When they knocked on the door, he answered calmly, almost as if he had been expecting them. His eyes flicked over the badges, then to the folder one detective clutched tightly. For a moment, he seemed to weigh his options: deny everything, demand a lawyer, or confess. He invited them in with a chilling casualness, setting the tone for what would become a shocking end to the decades-long mystery. Inside, his living room was meticulously tidy, family photos neatly aligned on the mantel. But as the detectives asked questions, cracks began to show. He stumbled when asked about 1979, fumbled when pressed about the Green Valley prom, and then, in a moment that would seal his fate, whispered, "I always knew someone would come back for me." With a warrant, investigators searched his home. In the basement, tucked behind old boxes of tools and children's toys, they discovered a locked metal trunk. The air in the room thickened as they pried it open. Inside were mementos, small, seemingly insignificant items: a ribbon, a class ring, a faded prom photo with Melissa's face circled in ink. Each object was a silent scream, a piece of evidence that tied him to the night she vanished. The DNA, the fingerprint, the hidden keepsakes, all of it formed a damning case. But what no one expected was his confession. In the interrogation room, under the pale blue glare of fluorescent lights, he leaned back in his chair and began to talk. Not just about Melissa, but about others. Towns where he had lived briefly. Women who had disappeared, their cases left unsolved, their families left with no answers. He spoke with a detachment that horrified even veteran detectives, as if he were reciting a list rather than recounting lives destroyed. In court, the revelations ripped through the community. Families from across multiple states attended, clutching photographs of loved ones who might have been among his victims. Melissa's brother, now gray-haired, sat in the front row, gripping his sister's prom photo so tightly his knuckles whitened. The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece, and when the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted in tears and gasps of relief. For Melissa's family, the conviction was both justice and heartbreak. They finally knew the truth, but it came decades too late. Her mother had passed away years earlier, never knowing what had happened to her daughter. Her brother, left to carry the weight, said quietly outside the courthouse, she was never forgotten. Now, at least, she can rest. Yet even in victory, there was unease. In his final statement before sentencing, the killer smirked and said, "You don't know all of it. There are more." The words froze everyone in the room. Were there other victims still hidden, family still waiting? Or was it one last act of cruelty, meant to keep control even as he lost everything? Melissa Turner's disappearance had haunted Green Valley for 40 years. The truth had finally emerged, but it left behind scars that would never fade. If you thought this case was shocking, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe now, because the darkest stories are the ones you never see coming.